I'll tell you one more story about angles shooting a deer on the elk I ever shot. We were in Craig, Colorado, and it was an incredible hunt. There was like 50 bulls had come through this area we were hunting in, private ranch. And one fella had already shot into the herd, and here's a herd coming toward us, and we're in trucks, running them down, and our guide got us in front of the elk. We kind of down a little low place, and we come up on top of the hill, and there they are. And all he hollered, he just said, "Whack 'em." Well, I'm a deer hunter, and I know, to get a shot, you better hurry up. So there's elk everywhere, and I didn't know how to tell a bigger elk from none of them, to tell you the truth, didn't any of them look like they were that big. I don't know if you've ever hunted elk much, but if you ever do your homework, because their bodies are so big, those horns can be huge, and they don't look that big. So instead of me trying to find, the mistake I made was instead of trying to find a real big pretty elk, they all looked about the same, and there was 3 out there about 100 yards. And like I say, I'm thinking I got to hurry. I could have taken my time and picked out a big one, but I'm out of the truck and bolting the gun and on the hood of the truck, and of those 3, I could tell one was a little better, but he was quartering away from me at a severe angle. Well, I'm shooting a 30-06 with a 168 grain bullet. Well, I know that thing will penetrate, 24 to 36 inches. So even though he's quartering severely away from me, I just aim at the back of his ribs, because I'm really aiming in his opposite front shoulder. Well, that elk couldn't have fell any faster. I mean, he was dead. It just went right through the vital area. So that's what we're talking about, angles. But go back to being careful. One more story about Danny Doss. My friend was turkey hunting one morning, and a guy shot him. Thank goodness. I think it's 1 shot or 2 shot went in his cheek here. Most of them hit his shoulder. But they were both going to a gobbling turkey. And the boy that shot him, what scared us all and made us all very leery about, hunting maybe where there's hunters you don't know, is the guy told Danny, he said, "I know I saw a turkey. I would do the same thing again." So let's don't, none of us want to be that kind of a person. So be a successful hunter, but be sure, be 100% sure of your target. Let me talk to you a little bit about a rangefinder, because I didn't use rangefinders for years. I don't know if you do. And if you're hunting in an area that you don't see, much more, maybe 100, 200 yards, you don't really need a rangefinder for rifles. For bows, they're wonderful. I had missed a deer in this area one time that I thought he was probably 400 yards. He was way out there, but he's a good buck, and I knew my rifle at 400 yards about how much the bullet dropped. But where I messed up was he went but about 340. Because I ranged it later to find out, and I shot at him twice, and I shot over him both times. But let me tell you how I use one. Number one is I know my rifle. I know I sight mine dead on at 200 yards, and I think it's about 4 inches low at 300, and then I think it's 14 inches low at 400. Well, like I say, I know we hunt pretty much the same area, and I've already ranged these areas, so I know exactly how far, where the deer cross. But let's say there's a deer at 400 yards, and I know my gun drops 14 inches. I've measured the deer in our area vertically, from the belly to the back, right across this area. And they're about 14, 15 inches, from the bottom of the belly to the top of the back. So when I see that deer out there 400 yards, and I know he's 15 inches wide here, if my bullet drops 14 inches to the center of his body, from the top of his back to the center of his body is 7 inches. So if I aim half of the body width over him, which is 7 inches, see what I'm saying? I'm pretty much going to be right on. And I always shoot a deer behind the shoulder. And I'll tell you why, because what if that bullet drops an extra 3 inches, or it doesn't drop 3 inches? I've got a huge kill area. As long as I'm shooting behind that shoulder, I've got probably a 8-inch pie plate area that'll get into the vitals. But if I don't know my rifle and I don't know the range, then you can't do this. And I hope I never shoot a deer over 200 yards. But like that big buck that Terry let get away, that deer was a world record. I'm sorry, he was a state record that year. It was back in the 70s. The reason I can tell you that I didn't even finish the story, but that deer was killed a couple of weeks later. A little boy named Steve Lolly. They had a local little hunting club there. They were hunting in the same area, and he kills this big buck. I was the taxidermist in that little town. It's called Pennington, Alabama. Well, in a little town, when something like that happens, everybody knows about it. And they came and got me, and they said, Steve killed this monster buck, and so I went up there naturally to see it. And guess who's standing there getting his picture made with it? The guy that had come by that had let it escape from him earlier, because he didn't take the shot. But back to your rifle. If you know, like I have a little chart even on the side of my stock. I've got how much my bullet drops, at 300, 350, and 400, just to remind me if I forget. I know what it'll do. I shoot it at long ranges, so I know what it'll do. I know my rifle. So by knowing your gun and knowing your range, you can make a long shot if you have to. Not all guns will shoot accurate 300 or 400 yards. I had an old 30-06 one time that it would spray the bullets at 200 yards, probably 6 inches. That gun would never be sufficient for shooting long range. So if you're going to shoot long range, you've got to practice and know your gun. Years ago, a real good friend of mine, Melvin Dixon, and some of the stories I'm telling you here, a lot of this information I learned from Melvin Dixon. I had shot with Melvin. Melvin had a nice place to shoot out in the country. He had bench rests set up and the sandbags and everything. And there was a rifle match, some kind of just out there in the country, and he had invited me to go with him and his brother-in-law. So we go to this rifle match. Now, Melvin's got the Contender pistols, he's got the bull barrel rifles, he's got good equipment. He also brings his sandbags. There was probably, like a competition for pistols and, 22s and big rifle, I don't remember, different categories. But the three of us won first, second, and third place in everything we entered. And it was partly because of the rifles, don't get me wrong, because here we are shooting a Contender, and these guys are shooting revolvers and automatics with iron sights, and we got a scope on our Contender. But the main thing was we knew how to take a rest. These guys would just be up there, they had just tables set up, and they'd be trying just to hold a gun or, on their elbows, and we had the sandbags, so we were shooting more accurate because of equipment, but taking a rest is a very important thing to learn how to do.